has improved tremendously. I came along at a time when, and I finished in '33, just it's 50 years, you know, the fact I've not been retired a couple of years. So there was a period where the first group that came out in the late 1800s, they were all had the opportunity to work with John by themselves. And then later on, they worked with some of the ones who were imbued with the same spirit, the same knowledge, the same technique that he had developed. And if I get wired up again, I've been on this thing for so I think I'll probably quit talking about the time they. But there's one thing I think the profession really ought to realize. That was the zeal and the enthusiasm that some of the early D.O.s had. And how they went out, when you imagine that they went to school for 2 years, and they went out into the major cities of the United States, and in a short time were treating the most important people in a community, and were able to not only do that, but to get laws so that in every state in the Union we have good laws. And they did this just on their enthusiasm for what they'd been taught. And then of course, you know, you get, it's sort of like religion. You get so much enthusiasm for it, and then if you go out and get knocked around a little bit. So I think back about 1910 to 1912, somewhere in that period, there was a sort of a loss of the first zeal because things had been accomplished. And then, of course, the medical schools in the country had begun to add to their requirements, and so suddenly we were adding this and we're adding that, and you add so much, and it's pretty hard to concentrate just on a fundamental truth. So I think that there was a lot lost in the fact that we suddenly had lost the zeal of the original founder. We were in a position now where we had to add all these new wrinkles to our education. And as we added those new wrinkles, some of the people were not educated enough to know whether this was detracting from their initial concept or not. And we hadn't yet developed the research to give them a good basis for it. So all in all, the profession has really done remarkably well because they faced a tremendous resistance in the beginning. But now we're at the point where we have a chance to really move in, because there's just not really, when you begin to talk about the diseases of organs, diseases of the body, we still do not involve the mechanical aspects and the reason that these liver, the kidneys, the lungs, everything might be not functioning at their proper level. So if we're going to, instead of saying, well, we'll let the medical profession do the research, and we have to do some real. We're in a position where we could do something that we haven't done yet. I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, some of us will get imbued with the spirit to get some research and really practical research, because again, a lot of the, and I had the privilege, I had a chance to work with Colin McConnell, I worked with Joseph Sternberg, I did research work with Louisa Burns. I've had the opportunity and then I served as the moderator for 2 or 3 of the national conventions where we had 400 in our technique sessions, so I had the chance to see practically all the early and better D.O.s practice their trade, and they all had one thing: they had enthusiasm for what they're doing. They had a feeling that they were giving the patient something. You have to feel that you've got something that you're giving the patient, because with all the dramatic things that are being done surgically nowadays, and to some extent in the medical field, we have something we can offer them, but we have to be sure of that ourselves, and we have to be sure of it by doing it. And there's too many people that they like they bake a cake once and it falls flat on them and they never bake another cake. And there's people in the osteopathic profession, and there are patients that will do that too. They'll say, I had a treatment once. I've had patients the first time, I was sure I didn't do them any good. But I had to have a feeling myself that I could do them good, and I had to radiate enough of that so that I had a chance to work with them. So these are some basic things that I want to talk about, because I've seen some of the older D.O.s that were so crippled up, their hands were crippled up, they could hardly do anything, but they still knew what they were doing, and even with all kinds of physical problems, they were able to give relief to their patients. So I've thrown a few things out there.
The say Dr. Still didn't teach technique, and you hear this all the time. Is that really true?
That's really true.
How did he present this?
Well, let me give you a little story. Grandfather Still, he liked to, of course, I was 10 years old when he died, but I still remember following him into the classroom. And he'd come down the street, he'd walk down the street, and I was tagging along behind because I didn't know any better. And so he'd go into a classroom, and the reason I didn't know any better because I liked to see what he did, because here'd be some professor be wound up in a nice lecture, and here he'd walk into the room, and he'd say, I'm going to draw a pig on the blackboard. And here this lecturer, who may have been a graduate of one of the major medical schools, would sit there, and here's this guy walked in there, and he says, I'm going to draw a pig. So he draws something on the board, and he turns around and stands in front of it. And he said, what do you think of the pig I drew? And of course, some of the students on the side said, oh, it looks something like a pig or something like that. And so he turns around, and he draws a turkey. And he said, never believe what they tell you. Find out for yourself. It's a turkey I drew. It wasn't a pig. Just because I said it was a pig, no sign it was a pig. If somebody tells you that a patient has pneumonia, don't believe them. Find out for yourself, because you're the only one who's going to be able to, if you're going to manage that patient, you're the one who's going to have to do it. So, no, he really didn't teach technique per se. He was a great believer in anatomy. I mean, he was, when my father used to go out with him at meetings, I mean, go out in the country. They'd go out in the country. Dad would have to carry the sack of bones, because he liked to demonstrate to the individual what he was going to try to do. And as he studied the bones, Dad said that sometimes that Grandfather Still would actually have a patient who was in severe pain from some physical injury and sit there and study him for 15 or 20 minutes and not do a thing, because he was trying to visualize what had happened to that individual and how it could be corrected. So he was not thinking in terms of a system of manips that could you just go in there and, and another thing Dad said, he said he got in the later years that Grandfather Still loved to take the tough cases and the dramatic cases for himself and let them do the ones that required a lot of work. Dad, we had a sort of terminology we used to use in our family, and we had a patient who we weren't doing them very much, except engine wiping or whatever we called it. Only we called it promiscuous pummeling, which meant we weren't really thinking of what we were doing. So no, I would answer that he didn't talk in terms of specific manipulation. Or,
and how did he get across the fact that was important?
Well, by observation to a great extent, and of course, as he did things and other people saw what he was doing, he didn't sit down and say to him, now, I did so-and-so this way. I made a correction, but you have to figure out for yourself how I did it, because you're going to have to feel the tissue. So it wasn't really so much in terms of a system of doing this for that and the other. And of course, another thing that in the early days, you know, my dad, you know, he'd sometimes treat 50, 60, 70 patients a day. And it was just sort of a case of finding an area of tension and doing as most they could for it in a period of time that they had to work with it. You have a question?
Yeah, when you're done, I just wanted to ask if you think that today's osteopathic physician or osteopathic students adequately reflect in their thinking and treatment approaches some of the ideals and concepts that were promoted in the early years of osteopathic medicine. And not only show that they preserve those ideals, but replicate them over the last 70 or 80 years.
I think there's been some of them, and I think that the trend is to go back into that, because we do have something that is really has never been developed to its potential, and the potential is there. And as people are reaching out further and further into the therapeutic areas of the world, but I think that there was a period of time when I think osteopathy sort of, just like anything else, you get the initial thrust, then you level off, and you have to have a reason for your second thrust. And I think we're at that period now, because we know enough now, and our students are educated enough so that they can absorb some of these concepts and really do something with them. But they have to feel that it's our ball game. It's not somebody else's ball game. It's our ball game, and we're going to develop these ideas. I think there's you know, it's like anything, any concept that comes along, it's shot at for a long time before it proves its worth. And you asked the question. I think after the initial zeal of some of the early D.0s, I think that there was a period where it was really leveled off, and may have gone downhill. And then there were a lot of ones who were practicing out in the field that were doing a good job, but they weren't documenting what they were doing. It's awfully hard. I mean, there isn't any D.O.s that have practiced any period of time that hasn't had some of the most remarkable results that could have happened. But you don't have controls. You're not like a medicine. You can't say, I had a patient come in with an arm that was 3 times normal, and I treated him 1 time, and it went down to normal. What did I do? I don't know what I did, but it happened. And there's never been the computers to document what like we have now. So I really think we're in I'm an optimist, as you probably know, but I feel that we are in a very enviable position now, and we've got the students with the education to really pick up at a point we didn't have that.
Well, how can we best now promote to the public the idea of the advantages of osteopathic medicine and the physicians to whom they should go for their medical care? It seems like just word of mouth has worked to a certain extent, but like you said, it's kind of leveled off, but there's still a lot of the country, let alone the world, that doesn't know about it. But it would certainly benefit if they did know. How can we promote that?
Well, as I pointed out, one thing I think we have to do some actual research on in areas to see why some of these disease processes, these degenerating diseases, are occurring, and whether we have a method that could reverse some of this. I think that's important. I think better documentation of what we can have accomplished and can continue to accomplish. You know, when you read medical literature about